questions, if anyone can think of anything. No? Otherwise, yeah, take it away, Kim. Thank you very much for coming to talk to us.
Thank you so much for the invitation and for having me come and talk to your meeting. It's really exciting to meet you all. And yeah, just I guess share a little bit about my passion for soil health and take you on a little bit of a journey, I guess, into why soil health is something I'm fairly passionate about. I might just share my screen with you. I've got a bit of a, oh, I can't share my screen. I don't know if you can let me in to share my screen. Just wait and see. It just said host disabled screen sharing.
Yep, sorry, I need to make you a co-host.
A little bit of technical. We forgot about that.
Yeah.
We're ready.
Yes, we did. And now I've got to work out there.
That's all right. Nothing like pressure.
Yes.
That's
all right.
great.
You should be able to share your screen.
I can. Awesome. So I just sort of whacked together a bit of a slideshow to kind of tell the story in pictures, I guess. So run you through a little bit about, I thought I'd start by, you know, sharing a little bit about my story and then a little bit of the work we're doing with soil health with integrity soils here in Australia. And, you know, basically everything comes back to soil health, and everything you look at, you can always relate it back to the health of our soils. And I'll challenge you while I'm giving you this presentation to try and think of something that doesn't relate back to soil health, and you can hit me with that at the end. But you know, I guess the purpose of agriculture has been is about really ultimately growing food. In many of the rural communities which I live and work, it's become commodities, you know, and we've lost sight of food and health and nutrient density. And you know, I have an ag science background, and I'm aware that many people don't think that there's any link to all the chemicals and the inputs we're using to what we're eating, but it's pretty hard to believe that's actually true, really, isn't it? So when you think about soil health relating to our health and the food that we eat, this table is pretty convincing. Like if you look at the soil depletion that's happened over 70 years and how much those nutrients have declined in the fruit and vegetables that we can buy commercially today, that's one of the reasons I'm fascinated by soil health. So there are many, as you'll discover today, but yeah, the proof is in the pudding. And I guess journeying into soil health, it often takes an aha moment. When you grow up in a farming family like I have, with long lines of farmers, and you go to university and study agricultural science in conventional science terms, you're taught a way of doing things. It's very linear and very sort of mechanical, I guess. And I was, when I was in my 20s, I ended up marrying into a farming family at Cropper Creek near Moree in northern New South Wales. And we were farming some of the best soils in the country. So these are my two young sons. This is quite some time ago. They're now in their 20s. But we were growing cotton, and they were brought into a business where there was chemicals everywhere. Our house was surrounded by crops that were sprayed heavily, you know, and in the end we had all this cotton, but it was the reality of living around the chemicals really took its toll on me. But that was sort of dissatisfying. But what really hit home to me was an image like this crop here in this photo. It's not the actual photo of the moment, because back in the when was it, this is the 90s, we didn't all carry mobile phones with cameras on us everywhere we went. But this is the closest I can find to sort of show you when I realized that we were in trouble and our soil health was to blame, because my now ex-husband and I were checking crops on the farm that had just come up, wheat and barley crops, and there was this huge patch where the crop was just so sick, it was hardly surviving. And I said to him, what on earth has happened here? And it was, the fertilizer rig ran out. And I've just gone, so if that's our soil without fertilizer, we're in trouble, you know. And that set me off on a bit of a mission, I guess, to learn more about soil health and things like that. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So I started questioning things. Then in that family business, the lack of succession planning was ultimately the downfall, and that business ended up being sold to facilitate the exit of my parents-in-law. But you know, so my journey into soil health, I became very passionate about how soil health was so important for farming families to have a business that could actually be viable to pass on to the next generation, because I could see that the soils were being mined and the next generation of farmers were really going to struggle to grow food and fibre economically and financially. So that's sort of where I started. And then I ended up meeting my current husband, Angus, about 17 years ago. And we bought a little block of land near Inverell, near a little place called Tinga. And Tinga is granite soil, quite interesting soil. We've had to learn to grow soil, and I'll show you a photo of why in a minute. But our journey for the last 15 years, we bought this block of land with permaculture in mind, actually. So I thought you guys would be interested to hear this little story. And we started regenerating soil that was mined for tin in the 1900s. It was pretty empty. There weren't many nutrients in our soil or much organic matter. It had been overgrazed, and it was pretty hard. We rebuilt soil using mostly these Dorper sheep that you'll see in this photo, plus our pet Highland cow has been a major feature in that journey. And thankfully, Angus likes fencing and managing grazing, and has been doing that since a child growing up in New Zealand. So, grazing management has been building soil along with biodynamics as well. The flow form you'll see here is part of the biodynamic journey we've been on since 2006. So combination of managing our animals and biodynamic preps, and really avoiding a lot of inputs, trying to see how we could grow soil without lots of inputs. So we've had some pretty amazing years where we've had an abundance of food, and the food production when it's rained has been unbelievably abundant. Like, it's just unreal. But we've also had record-breaking droughts and fire. So not every year looks like these photos, but these are some of the sort of the story, I guess, of our journey into soil health here, and trying to grow soil on soil that was mined for tin has been a real teacher and only made us more passionate about soil health. Also, during this period of time, 12 years I spent working as a rural financial counsellor in Inverell, working with farming families who were in financial hardship. And I couldn't not keep seeing time and time again how the lack of soil health was contributing to them not being successful. And yeah, it was just so obvious to me. I could see it reflected on all the financials I was dealing with. So like I said, you keep seeing it reflected and kept being reinforced to me. So I kept in my own life learning everything I could about soil health, and fortunately get to work with it now as well, which is pretty cool. But this is what our place looked like in the early 1900s when they were sluicing our creek for tin. And when I found this photo in a local sort of historical museum, it was pretty scary to think that that was our landscape. There on the right-hand side of that image is our place. Like, it really rammed home what had happened. And the scars of this mining are still very visible in our community, but, they basically took all the topsoil and just left it. So yeah, it's been a pretty interesting journey. This is our place, a photo of our place that I took in February 2019. I took this photo because part of our journey has been fire recovery as well, which has only been it's been really interesting from a soil health perspective. So I thought I'd share that story. I was driving out the gate on the 13th of February last year, not knowing what I'd find when I came home. And as you do when there's a bushfire on the way, you take a photo and think, well, let's hope this is still standing when we get home. Fortunately, the house was, but not much else. So that's what we saw. And that was what was coming. So, soil health is partly to blame for some of these wildfires, I have to say, because we now have soils that don't absorb water, that get hot, and we end up with climatic conditions that fires like this, you just can't prepare for. So that arrow is where our house was. And that was a pretty scary kind of thing to be looking at coming straight for you. And before that, we had fire breaks all around us, and we weren't living in the thick scrub, as you saw from my image. But yeah, a fire like that comes through, and you think 15 years of soil regeneration. When we got back and found out, we were like, well, that was worth it. What are we, all that good soil building is up in smoke. So But it's not the case, as you'll soon see. But that's sort of how you feel when you return to that. And we burnt really well because we had grass. So unfortunately, we made all the news shows as well because we had black paddocks because we had grass and we'd been in drought and a lot of people were bare ground. So yeah, we were very black. And this is some of the other photos of what we found. So she was pretty ordinary. This little shed was a miner's hut from the tin mining days that was destroyed, and you know, our gardens were burnt, our house almost caught, but thank goodness was caught and put out in time, and our Highland cow turned up to be okay, but very singed. So we were probably more worried about her than we were the house, to be honest. But yeah, we were pretty relieved when we saw the cattle, our 2 pets, that was all we had left because we destocked all of our sheep due to drought a week before the fire, which was a very good decision. But yeah, that's the sort of thing we endured. And I want to show you, like, soil health wise, I thought this would be interesting if we're talking soils, to show you the difference between our fence and the neighbouring fence that had been overgrazed before the drought and just kept being overgrazed during the drought. But our grass was still there. We were trying to save ground cover, which didn't work in the end, but you can see how much grass we had in contrast to the neighbour through our grazing management and soil health being our priority. So when you're managing for soil health, you have to make some pretty tough decisions. And for us, that was to get rid of our sheep. We hung on to a core of sheep as long as we possibly could. And then we just knew we had no feed. It wasn't raining. We don't get much grass growing in winter. So they went to preserve soil health. So that's why this is part of the story. And yeah, we were relieved they'd gone, but it was tough to find this left at the end of it. But then, so what we did, we only had 1 animal left, so we put her in a sacrifice paddock because, again, soil health was our plan. She went in a paddock and was contained in an area so that the damage that she did was contained and the rest of the place could recover. So managing for soil health, these are the sorts of decisions you make. We then had to eventually find a way to load her and take her on adjustment to a friend and client's place who had some grass. And, you know, but after a fire, even the yards are burnt. So it took us quite a while. So we were Meals on Wheels for a few months, feeding our pet cow and calf to keep them going till we could find a home and actually load them up and get a race going to get her in a ute to get her away. But yeah, those are the things you do, preserving soil health. And it really does make a difference when you stop the animals trafficking on bare ground. But when the rains come, what fire does to your soil is make it really hydrophobic. And this is a photo of the first decent rain we got after the fire. We ended up with 12 months of not much rain at all after that fire, which was pretty hard. And kind of like the fire continued to burn for a lot longer because it wasn't raining. But you can see what it does after a fire. The water just can't sink in. The soil gets a waxy coating on it, and the water's really difficult to get in. So sometimes worm extracts and calcium products can help break those hydrophobic coatings. But yeah, that's often the reality after a fire. And if you often see burnt ground, you'll notice that the water just doesn't get in. But then life started to return and the ground started to seal over, and the soil, you know, we were pretty traumatized having so much bare ground when we'd done everything we could to stop having bare ground. But this is it returning to health. And working with Nicole Masters and Integrity Soils, she has a fire recovery remedy that it has calcium and some biological stimulants in it to help repair the hydrophobic nature of the soil and sort of help kickstart that soil back, the biology and the life processes in the soil. So that's a photo of my husband Angus in our tractor putting that out, doing our best to do what we could, but it ended up not raining much after that application, but it felt good doing something for the soil after fire. So that was what we were doing there. And then, you know, we lost a lot of our gardens. So a fire coming through with the heat of that, all of these trees, and we had an orchard beyond that hedge, a really beautiful, quite a number of trees in an orchard, and a lot of our deciduous trees ended up as this pile of wood chip, which wasn't really in the plan. I started wood chipping the orchard to build a fungal soil, and it meant it burnt really well, unfortunately. So we've got this huge pile of 8-metre long pile of wood chip now that we're just about ready to start rebuilding our soils with now. At first, we were too nervous to put that out because things could have burned again last summer. We had fires very close by again in sort of that October to December period, and that wood chip in a dry environment was just too much of a fire hazard to put anywhere near any gardens or a house. So that's been waiting for things to shift, and I'm about ready to start putting it out now. But it's quite amazing to think that, you know, at least we sequestered a lot of carbon in the trees and the orchard that we created, and now that's going to go back into building the soil for the next version of this property. So it's about the whole cycle of life, I guess, and starting anew and learning and redesigning with a permaculture framework in mind, because you can always learn and do things differently after something like that. So but this is another element of, you know, when you look after your land and your soil first before your animals, and we still care deeply about our animals, I have to say, but we always make decisions on what we do with them based on how we're looking after our landscape firstly. This was a photo in August last year. We were having these horrendous dust storms, and you guys were being impacted, everywhere was being impacted by dust storms. This photo, I went out and braved the dust one afternoon because the dust was kicking off paddocks all around us. Down this road here, there was dust flying. There was dust flying off this neighbouring block. That's the other side of that fence line photo I had. And you get to our little block of land that was still pretty bare. It was a lot barer than we'd like to see it. Had a, you know, it's a bit of grass trying to reestablish on it, but the dust wasn't flying off our property. And that's when we started to feel like, you know, maybe there is something to this soil health beyond fire. This soil has sort of, it's stabilised much quicker because we got the animals off it, and we kept, you know, just trying to, you know, keep looking after it as our main priority. To see that dust-proof fence was astounding, but it got even better than that. And in November last year, we had quite a heavy storm of rain, and this is the view between the different, just only difference is grazing management. The rain was just as intense both sides of that fence, but behind the fence on that bare overgrazed country, the water's like a river, and our soil was soaking it in. And we were like, wow, we have to photograph this. So just to show, you know, you sort of feel like you've undone all your work, and then you know, nature, you look after nature, it looks after you, and the water's soaked in beautifully. So that was pretty reaffirming that our soils were still in reasonably good shape considering what they'd been through. And this was a photo I took back in February. I think I was talking about fire, and I just raced out and took a photo. And so all the native grasses following the rains really came in January and February this year. All the native grasses have returned. We've got this huge now bulk of grass that's again a fire hazard. And now we're looking at getting some more animals in to help us manage this and turn all of this grass into soil. So managing my husband Angus has been working like a Trojan the last few weeks. It's been really hard to find grazing animals because so many were sold off during the drought, and they've gotten really expensive. But we're hoping to find some, a friend's got some for sale on the weekend that we're hoping we might be successful in auction at getting. But you know, that this grass now needs the impact of cattle particularly, and grazing animals to help cycle all of that nutrient back through the system and build soil. So that's where we're at now, and we hopefully get some animals soon and start managing them again to build the soil back to health, and hopefully better than it was before. But so, you know, that's my story, and that's part of, like, I guess what I bring to this role, regenerative ag coaching. We call our role as coaching with integrity soils, because we don't want to adopt a come and tell a farmer what to do approach. We really like to help them become the expert in their business through learning more about healthy soil. We end up, as you can see in that image, and that's my husband Angus and some clients, we end up getting them passionate about digging holes in the soil and learning about the function of their soil so they can make better decisions. And hopefully, you know, in the process, we're making a difference for the planet if we can address soil health. So it's pretty exciting. And a day spent with a farmer like this, digging holes and looking at soils, goes so quickly, and it's actually really cool fun. So we have I think it's a pretty cool job. But what we do in our role is we're in our farm clients that we work with, everything comes back to soil health. So we, relating all of this back to their business, the health of their plants and animals. We're trying to actually help these farmers transform their business, not just change and swap one thing from another to another. Like, we're not just swapping toxic inputs for friendlier inputs or killing things nicer because they like to kill everything that they don't want. We're trying to actually help them change their whole mindset. So that's why we really talk about transforming things with our farmers. It's certainly not a simple thing to access, but that's our goal, is to help them shift their mindset around the problems that they see on their farm and how they deal with them. And to do that, we have to commit to that ourselves. We have to question our own beliefs and our own mindset, and walk that journey alongside them. So we don't come in as a big boss and boss around and tell them what to do. It's really just journeying with them. Everything's individual, so there's no one size fits all approach to how we approach the soil health on the farms we work with, but there's common principles, and I'll introduce you to those because they'll apply on every scale. Whatever scale we're growing food on, it applies. And we work with the willing. They have to want to change or they don't come in our door. So they have to really buy into the process to get the results, and when they do, it's really quite exciting. And really taking a whole of systems approach. So permaculture is a framework I've used for many, many years. I actually taught farmers whole farm planning for 3 years. And I didn't call it permaculture, but it was definitely in there, just not labeled, because it helps you to take that holistic ecosystem approach, and it applies on every scale again. So it's been an inspiration in all of this, and still is with the soil coaching. At Integrity Soils, our approach is really based on the 5 M's, and this is the work Nicole Masters has done. If you haven't heard of Nicole, Google her and check out the Integrity Soils website. We've got lots of YouTube videos, and she's got an amazing book that she put out last year called For the Love of Soil. And Nicole sort of has kind of created that whole systems approach, looking at the 5 M's with soil, and you'll see there that mindset encompasses everything. We reckon 90% of the work we do with our farmers on soil is mindset. That encompasses their management. So as you can see from my photos, grazing management is the foundation of grazing enterprises and soil health. If they don't address the way they move those animals on a landscape and manage them, nothing's going to improve things. So, really getting them to understand. And a lot of farmers don't seem to have an inherent ability to manage the grazing of stock, or they think it's too hard, or, but it's really not that difficult once they get to see how the system behaves in that when you're managing them and as an ecosystem. We also look at organic matter in our soils, which is the foundation of so much of the health of the system. We look at the minerals and the microbes. So we look in the whole of the soil health. And hopefully we help farmers create really enjoyable farms that are profitable and that have a healthy ecosystem as their basis. So that's the goal. And that's the kind of people that work with us, are people seeking that as well. But we use a triage process, and you can apply this on any scale of growing you like, from a pot plant right up to broadacre stations, huge areas. If we put first things first, this is the best way to attack soil health. So we first look at solar energy, because sunlight drives the whole system. Photosynthesis is what drives soil health, and actually plants are what build the soil. So if we have green growing plants that can harness all that free energy from the sun and turn it into carbon to build up soil carbon and feed the microbes in the soil and grow us food and fibre, that's the process. So when we work with our farmers, we look at that as far as grazing management goes. And we also look at it with people who are growing crops as having green plants in the ground all year round and avoiding bare, dead fallows. So a lot of farming practices they just spray and kill everything, thinking they're conserving moisture, which has been shown that's not the case, but the mindset's not quite catching on quickly. But if they have green growing plants all the time, they're building soil, they're actually storing more water, and everything's harnessing that free energy. They're not letting it fall on dead, bare ground. So that's the first thing we look at. So in any scale, if you've got bare soil, you're not capturing solar energy and you're not improving soil health through sequestering carbon. The next thing we look at is air. So the air in the soil is huge, and so many of our soils can't breathe. They're not breathing. So you think about air, think how long you would last if you put your hand over your nose and mouth. You wouldn't be here long, would you? So, you know, our soils are suffocating and they're buckling under that pressure. Like, and, you know, the air is been an issue because the soil organic matter has been destroyed by farming practices. Cultivation hasn't helped. And sometimes there's mineral imbalances too that contribute to aeration. But, you know, think about, if you're looking at the health of your own soil, think about how you can improve soil aeration as a priority, because it's actually at the top of the list, and it's free. They don't charge us to breathe the air. So the next thing is water, and getting water into the soil and keeping it there. So we look at that in relation to the decomposition processes in organic matter as well, because if we have water in our soil, 1% carbon stores 144,000 litres of water per hectare every time it rains. So if we can improve organic matter, we improve structure, we get water and air in our soil, and we hold that water for drought proofing. So that's why water is really important. And I'll show you some of the tests we do in a minute, but there's many of the soils, like you saw that photo I had of the hydrophobic soil. We have lots of soils out there in the farming lands that do not absorb water when it rains, and water just lies in the paddocks. And if you drive around the countryside, you'll see it. And everyone will be celebrating all the water everywhere, but I'm going, why is it not in the soil where we can grow things? So yeah, getting water in and holding it. And decomposition processes and biology are also on our list. So how does the biology that you need warmth, you need oxygen, and you need water to cycle some of the nutrients, so, you know, from the plant material through the soil, and drive those decomposition processes. That sometimes doesn't work either. So we look at that. We look at the biological health of the system, and then we look at nutrients. So in conventional farming, mostly they just look at nutrients, which is last of our list. We do these in order of priority from 1 to 6. So they go there, it all gets sold to people out of a bag. They're starting to catch on to biology. They've been for years selling water and trading water. So they see the value in that, but no one's really capitalizing on the free inputs of air and sunlight in their system that are really the drivers of soil health and actually profit if you're running a farming business. So this is something you probably want to write down, that triage, because whatever soil you're working with, be it in your garden, in pot plants that you grow on a balcony or on a small block or on a large farm, whatever that applies to, this triage process stands. And it's really about just addressing first things first. So I thought I would explain that to you, but also then, you know, remind us all of what a healthy soil actually is. Like, they're going to hold on and release the nutrients through that decomposition process that I just mentioned. They can absorb and release water and hold water. They have a great structure, so they have air because the structure allows that airflow through the soil. They're full of life. They protect the plants against pests and diseases. They detoxify, you know, they can break down toxins. So a healthy soil can actually handle small amounts of chemical inputs, and a healthy soil can detoxify small amounts of herbicides and things. The problem has been that we've overused and overdosed all these things and killed the life in the soil. So now all those toxins are just building up and making the system even more dysfunctional. So there are farmers that can get away with a little bit of an input and have zero glyphosate residue if they have a healthy living soil. Not that we like using glyphosate, but, you know, if it's a tool and it's not used all the time and a system can detoxify it so the residues aren't there, that's pretty encouraging as well. We also have our soils are helping buffer climate, you know, extremes of climate. And that's why I kind of thought I'd throw in those photos of the fire and the soil recovery from fire. And you can see that a soil that's been managed in a way to foster health and, you know, the health of the soil will recover quickly. It will be healthier ultimately. And it also helps to to, you know, if you've got a healthy soil with a good amount of organic matter and you can hold an extra 144,000 litres of water every time it rains, you don't go into drought as quick as everybody else, and you come out quicker. So because you can get the water in the soil and hold it there for the plants. So we're seeing a lot of the drought conditions we're experiencing really are due to poor land management and the fact that, you know, we don't have soils that can absorb water or hold on to it. And so we're making the system more prone to drought and to flooding. So, you know, a healthy soil is going to help buffer that. You're still going to have extremes, but you're going to reduce them and you're not going to make them worse. You know, I often say to the farmers, we're going to get extremes of climate. Let's not make it worse through our management. Let's try and buffer as best we can. So that's another reason I'm really passionate about healthy soil. And they're full of metabolites, plant growth hormones, enzymes, and they grow healthy, nutrient-dense food. So that's what our aim is, I guess. And to have a soil like the one in the picture is ultimately the goal. And, you know, as for a farming business, we sell it to them as being, you're going to be more resilient, you're going to have healthier animals, you're going to be more productive, you're going to save money on all those inputs and have more profit. But for you, you know, for the community, it means that we have healthy plants, healthy animals, and healthy people. It means that our water cycle is restored because we can, you know, hold and cycle water. As I said, more resilience. We're actually putting carbon out of the atmosphere into the soil. So we're helping to address climate change. We have healthier ecosystems, more vibrant communities, and we don't have the amount of chemicals in our food system that, you know, it's quite scary actually when you see what's happening to our food. It's frightful. So, you know, healthy soil means less of that and more nutrient dense food. And I'm sure you can think of many, many more things it means. So as I said, everything comes back to it. But, you know, one of the things I thought, because you're into permaculture and obviously interested in soil, I just share a little bit of a tool that you might not have seen before, you may have, I'm not sure. But we're looking at, you know, if our main goal is to increase photosynthesis and produce humus in the soil through capturing solar energy. One of the things we use is a refractometer. So these little gadgets, we can measure the plant dissolved sugars in plants to see how effectively that plant's photosynthesizing, because that's the measure of how effectively we're capturing the free energy from the sun and turning, you know, putting good nutrients back into the soil to feed the soil biology and sequester carbon. And when we have plants with a high Brix level, which we call the Brix is what we read through this gadget, and this little dial on the side, if you can see that, shows you what it looks like to look through one of these. You get a line here, it's quite good. We aim to have over 12, and this one's just about 14, I guess. But a nice fuzzy line means the calcium processes are good. And yeah, that gives us a reading of how healthy those plants are and our system is, how efficiently we're capturing free sunlight. And yeah, when we do that, we're going to have healthier plants. If we're eating those plants, we don't need to eat as much of them to feel full. The vegetables we grow with a high Brix taste amazing, and kids are renowned to be munching on kale leaves or vegetables that a lot of kids turn up their nose at. When they've got a high Brix, they just taste so much better, and they're more frost resistant. So, you know, it's a really simple little test. You don't need to have anything too complicated to check the health of your plants, but if photosynthesis is working well, it's an indication the whole system's also working, and that the minerals in the soil are reasonably balanced as well. So it's the main driver is checking how effectively plants are photosynthesizing, but that is going to depend on the health of the soil as well. It's one of those measurements that you need to have to get a really good reading, take it after lunch so that the plants have been photosynthesizing in the morning. And sometimes if the plants are really moisture stressed, that might not give you an accurate reading because the plants, the water is more concentrated. And in a soil that has low humus and low organic matter, it drops more rapidly. So organic matter is it's just so amazing for soil and plant health on every level. But those are some of the factors that influence it. And you can test different parts of the plant to see how, you know, if there's nutrient imbalances there. Is the bricks varying during the day or staying the same? It's part of the whole system of observation, but if it's not something you've heard of, you might want to have a read. And if you're wanting to grow nutrient dense food, this is quite a handy way to measure how you're really tracking with the sugar content in those fruit and vegetables. But yeah, that's part of the process when we're out with farmers monitoring soil health. We do use a refractometer when we have green growing plants, which doesn't always happen when you're in drought, but that's part of our process. But I thought, and I have got time, I thought I'd run you through a quick soil health assessment. So you get to see a little bit about the soils we're seeing out in our travels throughout Australia. And we've been working throughout Victoria and New South Wales mostly. Had some trips planned to WA and all over the place this year that haven't happened. So we're working remotely. But I'll just I thought you'd enjoy a bit of a tour through our typical day monitoring soil health. We set up, with our farmers, we set up monitoring transects, and you'll see this tape in this photo. This is Angus and one of our clients, and we set up a site with a tape that we come back to time and time again when we're measuring soil health for farmers, so that we can come back and compare apples with apples, so that we know that the soil health measurements are actually comparable because they're coming from the same place in the paddock. We do what's called the visual soil assessment, and if you Google visual soil assessment, you can get a free download. It's a New Zealand-based tool, but it's a really good process for assessing soil physical health, and it's freely available online. If anyone wants it and can't find it, let me know and I can send you a link to it to run you through a process of working out how healthy is my soil. We look at minerals. We do take a soil test along the transect as well. We look at soil biology. We can take microbe tests as well. And the refractometer is part of the plant health assessments we do. We take lots of notes on, any symptoms that are showing up in plants, or basically doing a complete medical checkup on the farm really in this process. And we take tons of photos, which means I have tons of photos of soil to show you. And I'm going to go quickly because I know I haven't got lots of time. So we get out on farm, we set up a tape, and we map our transect, and we take these measurements. And the aim is to take lots of photos so they can track the changes on their landscape over time as they try and improve soil health. This is a cover crop, and there's a lot of bare ground. So a lot of people are growing cover crops, but one of the things that I don't enjoy about cover cropping is when they create bare ground to do it. But this had been put in a very dry spot as well. They hadn't had rain for years. And we then take a photo of the ground cover at a set point on their transect to see and monitor over time the changes in that visible appearance above the ground. This is a water infiltration test. So we actually measure how effectively a soil can absorb water, and we try and simulate rainfall. So we use this very expensive piece of, and you can do this in your gardens, and this is a great activity for kids as well, a great activity for anyone. I think if you're going to measure one thing, soil health, you measure and see how effectively you can get water in your soil when it rains. This bit of PVC pipe's probably 20 centimetres long. We hammer it in with a board, and we hammer it in about 10 centimetres depth into the soil. And then we pour the equivalent of an inch of water in. We put a bit of plastic over the top of the surface, pour an inch of water in, and an inch is either an inch on a ruler up the side of that pipe, or you can calculate what an inch of water is over that area. We do that 3 times. This soil was pretty scary though. And I put 1 inch of water into it. And as you can see, we don't like seeing bare ground like this anyway. These guys have been drought affected and really wanted to improve their soil health coming out of drought. This is before we came out of the drought, but they wanted to be ready when it rained to make some differences. And the soil fell apart when it got wet, and it came up that tube. So what that said to me was that there's no organic matter in this soil and not much structure. When it rains, that soil was just going to collapse with wet. And so you actually get to sort of observe what happens to your soil when it rains. And it can be quite confronting, when people pay a lot of money for land to have a soil that does this. And water we couldn't get more than an inch in, and that inch came up the tube. So that water cycle is pretty broken. And unfortunately, large tracts of our countryside are behaving in, not always coming up the tube, but are behaving in ways that are not taking water. So we're going to have a struggle coming out of a drought when we have a soil that can't drink water in. But that test's really cool. And we try and get 3 inches of water in separately, like we time each inch and hope we can get them in. And if it takes more than 12 minutes for an inch of water to get in, the water cycle's broken. But it'd be lovely to see it just go straight in. And when soil health improves, that's the first thing you'll notice. I've actually got a video of our veggie garden trying to demonstrate this test for some of my farming clients, and it goes straight in, and it's so cool to see. So test that in your garden and see how you're going. Then I take photos. We dig cubes of soil out, and you can do this in any sized area. Dig a cube of soil with your shovel and actually have a look down the soil profile and see how deep are the roots growing, what sort of compaction do you have, what sort of crumb structure do you have. This looks pretty hard. I can't see much air in that soil. I don't think any of you will either. So it's got roots that are going down at depth, but there's no real good crumb structure, and there's layers of compaction. And this one's another cube I dug out of some farming country, and you can see these layers of compaction there. It's quite frightening. And so a lot of the time we're focusing above the soil, but we've really got to start to look beneath it to learn and see how we can shift things. And as you can see with our triage, we've got solar energy captured in plants growing, but we haven't got any air, and water going in there wasn't real good either. So, you know, if we can't sort out the air and water, there's not much point throwing heaps of fertilizers at something that can't function healthily, can't breathe and it can't drink water. So the priority there is really to bring the air and the water back into that soil. And we take photos of lots of things when we look at the soils with our farmers, wormholes, if the soil's modelled, if there's anything different, we take tons of photos. We also do a slaking test, and that's something you can do to see how your soil holds up when it's wet. It's just another element of watching your soil in water. And there's lots of information on slaking tests online that you can, instructions to follow to do that, and see as the soil organic matter improves, those clods of dirt will hold together when wet and hold their shape beautifully. But when we have degraded soils, they just collapse in a heap, and some of them disperse and make the water really cloudy. So that's what we're looking for there, to kind of measure those things. And then as we come back over time, these are the things we're going to see improving. We also take photos of the roots of our plants. We love to see rhizosheaths like this photo here, where the roots have this beautiful coating. And, you know, we've had an oats plant that was brought to a workshop in Armidale 1 month before a second workshop, and it was dug out of the soil. It had beautiful rhizosheaths that had been sown with some biostimulants and worm extracts, and it was beautiful. And the owners of the oat plant were very excited to show off the success they'd had with the rhizosheaths. They took it home and they put it in their garden and brought the same plant back to another workshop with Nicole a month later. So when the plant has a rhizosheath like that, it can survive being out of the soil for a day and come back again. So that was pretty cool. We started calling the oats plant Otis. He became quite famous. So, but yeah, that's why we want rhizosheaths. They protect the roots. Like, you often dig plants out and they have bare root systems, and that's a sign that the microbial community around those roots isn't there. It's just like we have gut bacteria. Well, the plant's digestive system is the root system, and that rhizosheath is a sign it has healthy gut bacteria to help it absorb nutrients and exchange nutrients in the soil and find nutrients in the soil. So yeah, these are other plant roots. We take lots of photos of the rhizosheaths on plants in our travels and love to find it when we have them. And we don't always see it, but people who've been using these programs for sometimes even a short time start to see rhizosheaths on their roots, where before they were bare, and in conventional farming systems they're bare. There's no rhizosheath, there's no healthy gut for those plants. We also look at soil biology health by doing microbe tests. So that's a really interesting test. They're not cheap. They're about $300 to do a soil microbe test, but we get to help our farmers see what sort of microbial and biological health they have, as well as the physical soil health. How well are they, residues breaking down? Have they got mycorrhizal fungi? And gives them ratings. So how are they tracking as far as the bacteria and the fungi in their soil, and the ratio of bacteria to fungi is a really useful thing to be looking at. How diverse is the system? And, as above, so below. So the more diversity of plants you have above the ground, that'll be reflected below the ground. So there's no surprises that in a lot of our agricultural soils where there's not a lot of diversity, we don't have the microbial diversity either. I mean, we see a lot of the farming soils really anaerobic and have a really high number of anaerobes, which shows there's no air, they can't breathe. And we also look for protozoa and, again, the mycorrhizal fungi ratio, right, numbers, to give us a feel for the protozoa are crucial for cycling nutrients in the system, and the mycorrhizal fungi for obtaining, they'll extend the reach of the plants enormously to get free phosphorus and free nutrients for those plants and exchange them for carbon, so from photosynthesis. So we want to see all these free workers and how they're going. So that's a really big part of learning more about that biological health. And there's 3 labs I know of that do these sort of tests. And we're encouraging farmers to not just do a soil test based on chemistry to tell them how much to put on, but we're starting to get them to do the physical health assessments like I just showed you, do the this biology monitoring, and then put that together with their soil test and look at the whole picture, not just part of it. And it's really quite cool. We also do leaf tests on the plants if that's appropriate at the time we're there, because that helps us see the difference between what's in the soil and what the plants can access. And they can be vastly different as well. So if the plants are accessing something, but it's not in the soil test, but the plants are healthy, why be putting it on artificially if you don't have to? So that's helping our farmers cut back inputs and keep their soils healthier as well. And the farmers with the micro tests get a bit of a report to tell them what to focus on, and that's really cool as well. But and I'll race through this really quickly because I'm mindful of time, but when we come into a farming system, we try and first stop them doing harm. How can we stop them cultivating? How can we stop them using large amounts of synthetic fertilizers that do all those microbes in that test out of a job? They just can't survive. Compost can be a problem if you use too much of it or you don't use good quality compost. So some composts are really bacterial, and we get our soils, bacterial soils don't have good structure, like you need the fungi in there to build structure. So sometimes are they overusing compost, which does happen. Try and get them to stop killing everything, because you can't bring life back into your soil if you're killing everything. And we try and encourage them to move away from monocultures and bring more diversity into their system. And importantly, in grazing enterprises, we really do a lot of education on grazing management. As you can see, we're pretty passionate. We've built soil with grazing. And we doubled the soil carbon before the fire just through grazing alone. So we're pretty passionate about trying to help people set up that foundation of grazing to build soil, and then help them take strategic actions. Because a lot of the time when we discover all of these things, we start throwing things everywhere, like a bit of a dog's breakfast, and nothing's working. And they've done all the courses, they've read all the books, they know all this stuff should work, and it's not happening. It's often because they don't have a strategy. So we help them form a strategy. We feed those underground workers in the biology. We help encourage them to maintain ground cover and not have the bare soils that you saw in some of those photos. Try and bring diversity in at every level. Again, grazing management features really strongly. We also buffer their inputs. If they're still using inputs in their system, for a farmer to just stop killing things can really set them back, and they can crash their system because they're addicted to these inputs. They're addicted to nitrogen fertilizers, addicted to herbicides. And the minute they stop, everything's broken, and it doesn't work. If we can put them out of business stopping, that's not a good option. So we buffer with the carbon source. So bringing in carbon sources with fertilizers, and if they're using a herbicide to help do less harm is the first action. And then, they have to earn the right sometimes to stop doing these things, and they have to build the resilience back into their system so that they can really get rid of those harmful inputs and stay in business in the meantime. So that's a big part of it. And if they disturb their soil, we repair it. And I think even natural events like floods and droughts are disturbance events. So how can we then repair after those disturbances? And often that's biostimulants, worm extracts, compost extracts, those kinds of things. And we try and train them to think that if a little bit's good, more's not better. And we're all guilty of it. I've overdosed plants with good things, good biological things. Sometimes it's not how much we use of these products, it's just tweaking it and supporting the system with little bits of goodness. And that's a real classic example of, in farming and in gardening, more's not always better. And when we're working with farmers in transformation, it's really navigating. It's a huge shift for them. They've got to get out of their comfort zone. and start to see the challenges. Like as in permaculture, the problem is the solution. It is exactly the same when you're trying to shift in farming. How can they see the weeds that they hate and want to kill as actually telling them what's happening in their soil, and they're healing their soil? That's a pretty big mindset shift for a farmer, but that's the space we're trying to bring them to see, oh, these weeds are doing a job for me. I don't have to kill them all the time. And we've had farmers who've left the weeds alone and they've gone. While the one down the road who's still spraying them is spraying them every year and they're back thicker than ever. So trying to help them see that opportunities and things like that. And they've sort of got to trust the process of change and really commit to it. Because it is like in permaculture design, we're trying to align with natural principles and work with nature, not bash against it. And that is part of these guys have been, I guess, kind of schooled in ways to manipulate nature to achieve an outcome. But we're now trying to partner with it when we work with soil health and regenerative ag. So it's quite exciting. And you never stop learning and questioning, and it's actually, we'll never know it all, but if we keep asking questions, we will work it out. And it's really helping people tap into the fact you're never going to know everything, but if you ask the right questions, you'll find the way through. So that's a really big part of it with our soil health. And trying to support people with support networks. There's groups of farmers popping up all around the country, and it's really growing, which is really exciting, because I don't think I'd still be working in agriculture if this space hadn't opened up. I was very disillusioned to see what's happening with our soils and our ecosystems and our communities, and the health of the people out here is not good. And so, you know, to have this space opening up, it means I'm still working in an industry I'm quite passionate about, and supporting some of these farmers to move forward in this direction is pretty exciting. But, you know, when I tell them when they're going to survive something like that, they have to allow time. So, and if you find yourself in any area of land where you've got degraded soil, it's going to take time for that to heal. It's not like you just add on extra things in these approaches. And as permaculture, you'll kind of know that. You'll sit back and observe, and you don't have to keep adding on inputs or extras. It's really about paring it back to see what nature needs to happen. We don't just exchange one input for another. There are farmers just changing chemicals for biologicals, and that's fine. But in the space of soil health and regenerative ag, it's really not about exchanging inputs. It's about going beyond that and having a system that is functional and healthy. And there's no silver bullets. Like, we'll never have one answer to a soil health problem. And there was no, you know, if anyone comes and says, have I got the fertilizer or the soil amendment for you, you get nervous, because they don't always work in every situation. And we stop aiming for perfect soil test numbers. Like, there's schools of thought where I'm balancing soil numbers and ratios, and all I see, and I have a financial background as well, so all I see is that sending people broke. And often they're putting a lot of products on soils that just can't hold those products. So, you know, we really don't aim for that. We more aim to bring the life back in. And when we bring the biology in, the nutrients and the pH and everything mediate. So bringing life back in means the soil test numbers, soils become more functional, actually. We had a soil in Victoria that we visited. We did the physical soil health assessment that I showed you by, you know, assessing physical soil health in the paddock before we saw the soil test results. And if I hadn't seen that soil, I wouldn't have believed those tests were from that block, because it had high magnesium and high sodium. But this soil he'd been biological for 15 years, and his soil was beautifully healthy despite the numbers looking scary. So soil tests go out the window when biological systems in your soils are working. And we avoid overdoing anything. Nothing, you know, as I said, more is not always better. And 90% of it's our mental attitude, being able to step back and actually observe and watch that system. That's what helps, you know, in a large scale soil project. That's the main determinant of success, actually, is mental and mindset. And we try and encourage our farmers to focus on profit, not maximum production, because they've sort of been geared to produce yield at all costs, but often not even making a profit doing that because of the amount of money they're spending on inputs. So we really bring it back to focusing on what is profitable for you, not what is going to win you the top price at the sale, like the top, you know, or the highest yielding crop that made you no money. So that's it. And farmers often compare themselves on the highest yield or topping the sale price at the local cattle sale. So we're trying to bring them back to not see it like that as success anymore. But this is something I just thought I'd end this on because I thought you guys might enjoy it. I put this together for a presentation last year and it got quite a lot of input on social media, but it's like, you're a regenerative farmer or a regenerative soil builder when you focus on growing soil because it takes care of everything else. You focus on growing things, not killing things. You see the weeds as indicators. You don't go anywhere on a farm or in a garden or anywhere where there's dirt without a shovel, so you can actually look at the soil beneath the surface. You get all the rain because the water actually goes into your soil, so you actually do get all the rain when you look after your soil health. And you care for the livestock beneath the soil as your first priority. So when people start to see that there's always workforce in their soil working for free and care for them like they would the stock above the ground, then you really start to get it, and things start to function. These guys also become the expert again. They're not giving their power away to people selling them solutions, and that's really huge. They stop caring what the neighbours will think, because I reckon I work with all the farmers that all the neighbours are convinced are weird, and I think that's awesome. I just tell my farmers, if they think you're weird, you're a perfect client for me, because I work with everyone who's daring to be different, and there's a lot of social pressure in farming communities to conform, have weed-free fields, all the rest of it. So you stop caring about what people will think, and they start to enjoy farming again. Farming's become a toxic, unenjoyable pastime, and people on this path are loving life. They're vibrant, they're excited. You get in a room full of them and it's just buzzing with energy, and it's really cool to see. And they start to make a profit. So, if you're starting to grow soil on any scale, these will be very, very similar themes for you. Just, it doesn't matter what scale we're growing on, they all apply. So, and I might just, let's keep looking at the time. We try and take time, but I might just skip through that.
Kim, just, it's okay. You can take the time you need to go through this. It's actually, I'm pretty sure that nobody minds. Don't feel you have to rush, really, where we are interested in what you've got to say.
Yeah, cool. I'm nearly there. I was just like, oh, time's gotten away.
Don't worry about the time. We're good.
Get me talking on this. And
you can talk. But yeah, we'll listen your ear off.
Yeah, and I think I've heard this slide twice. That's a typo anyway, so that one's all right. That one's just popped in a second time to say, remind me of taking the time to transition. So if you are starting a new site, you're building a new garden, you're taking on a new lifestyle block, or you're deciding to have a tree change and buy a farm, you need to realise that this is a slow process. And it depends on good climatic conditions in essence, but then I reckon after about 7 years, we really saw things shifting up a notch for our soil on our block. And it was, that was in spite of a few dry years at the time. So take time and realise that it is a long process. But I guess, what I come down to is the most important fertiliser a paddock or a garden or any landscape where we're fostering soil can be is our footprints, and us being out and being present with our soil, digging a hole, actually noticing what's happening and observing. Like, it's the whole observe and interact principle in process. It's the best thing you can do to regenerate soil on any scale is just get out and be present with it and observe and see what's happening with it. The other thing I thought I'd let you know is I've just started teaching permaculture with this group, Permaculture Women, who have a lot of free resources on a free site. So, and I've been really impressed with some of the resources in this community as far as online learning goes. And there is a free 1 year long little thing if you want a bit extra permaculture that I thought looks really cool fun. And then I just thought I'd leave some details if you want to look me up on social media or contact me or have a read about our personal journey on our website at Biodynamic Life. We started that website to try and sell garlic and a little bit of a garlic growing enterprise at one stage, and I've just kept it going just as a bit of a ground for all the things we do. But